Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Hazardscape Live daily situational report for Indigenous disaster and emergency management information and news you can use. We do this daily live stream to outline what's going on across the country, specifically to do with Indigenous nations, so First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. And we're going to focus on the current weather, any environmental alerts, the current wildfire hazards that exist across the country as they pertain to treaty band lands and Inuit communities and Métis nations. And we'll go over some of the flooding and some of the other information that is out there as it pertains to disaster and emergency management situational awareness. So as always, if you want a copy of this written briefing, you can get it right now at app.hazardscape.com. There is no cost for it, and you can follow along as we go through it. It arrives and updates on the website every morning, usually about this time, and there is no cost for it. So you can grab that right now. And what I'll do is I'll put on the website address just so you can see where it is. This is where you can get the app right now, and you'll access later on too in this. I'm going to go through the new learning modules, the new training modules that we've added to this application. So to start off, we'll start off on the kind of lower risk things that are going on right now, which is the continued flooding through Alberta, Saskatchewan. It's really tapered down the last couple of days. So you can see now in and around Cold Lake, Bonnyville, Lac La Biche, on the Alberta side, things have really toned down, and it looks like they're probably starting to see decreases in flooding in these areas. You can see that it's kind of going to sit around those dangerous levels just under extreme for the first at least up until the end of the month. But even in and around Bonnyville area, we're starting to see things taper down a little bit with the flood risk. And then as you move east into Saskatchewan, you can still see those areas are still in the danger, or sorry, the extreme area as the water flows east. So that will probably all settle down here at the end of the month as well. So quite a month in terms of flooding around these nations in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Other than that, Ontario is still seeing, they had extended precipitation, and there's probably a lot of ground water saturation because of all the rain that they got early in the month, and their water levels are increasing a little bit too. So kind of still some flood risk across the country. And then this is probably as we get into the snow melt through these water basins, because they're kind of probably at the end of the line there as water flows into the Hudson Bay. But looks like there's going to be little spots and patches up around northern Yukon. Ice breakup is probably well underway, so their levels are a little bit high. That's a Northwest Territory. Sorry, Old Crow is probably in here. They're looking like they're in good shape compared to last year. Hopefully ice breakup is going well there too, but still water levels are quite in that danger zone as ice breakup happens in the north along the rivers. Even in around here, Fort McPherson area, water levels are in that kind of danger area. So not too bad. Even Oh, or if we look around, even in around Smith's Landing, the rivers there, little on the high side for sure. Definitely in that danger zone as water, probably as they're seeing some breakup and snow melt continue there with the warm weather we've had this past weekend. So still some high river flow. Doesn't look like anything that is causing too many issues. There we do have on our opening summary the record flooding along the Shell and Carrot Rivers in northern Saskatchewan. Peguis, we're keeping up to date on it, especially as their mitigation goes through. Right, they have a long-term mitigation planning underway, so hopefully Indigenous Services Canada is going to support them in that. But as far as the flooding goes, it's looking pretty good. Before we move on to the fire weather or fire risk, no, there's a few weather warnings out there right now through Environment Canada. There's a wind warning in just the southwest tip of Newfoundland, 110 to 130 kilometer an hour winds expected in there. Cape Breton is going to be affected by that same wind. And then it looks like there was some fog advisories down here early this morning along part of the Great Lakes around Thunder Bay. So other than that, the rest of the country in terms of weather is looking pretty decent. On to the fire risk and fire danger in the country right now. So we're seeing definitely the fire danger levels are now extreme in southern Alberta, moving north into the central part and then into Saskatchewan, which is, you know, pretty typical for this time of year. So nothing alarming about that. But definitely as this week's weather gets warmer, and we'll go over those forecasts in just a minute, we're going to see probably that dark red extreme 30 plus fire wind weather index numbers sort of move east into Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And we'll check out Atlantic Canada as well to see what weather they've got up and coming. Northern Alberta, that kind of shifted off a little bit. And then central BC, they're in that typical extreme fire weather index as well. So we'll see what the daily severity rating. This is just an additional component. It's a simple transformation of the fire weather index, which provides a better relative indicator of the effort required to suppress a fire. So it's typically summarized over months or a full fire season to give an idea of how challenging the fire weather has been during a period at a specific location or region. So you can just see here based on, you know, where things are at, the daily severity rating is extreme at a 10.87 plus. And that's where it can be difficult, especially in those, what we're seeing in Alberta, especially, that's outside the forest protection area. So that's a lot of grasslands and fields, prairies. It can be difficult to fight grass fires because, you know, as you get more south, it can tend to be a little windier, a little drier, and those fires can spread really quickly. We could look at the fine fuel moisture code. It's fairly representative of the fire weather index. This just talks about, again, moisture content of the very fine dead surface fuels that carry surface flaming in a conifer forest. So right now, just seeing, you know, where, like you look at Newfoundland, you know, the moisture content is in that like extreme danger to extreme ranking. So basically, as we look at this week's weather patterns, this is right now as of 9 a.m. as far as temperature in Canada. But as we see by 3 p.m., you can see there's southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, even starting to get into Ontario, Manitoba, it's getting quite warm. Like today, they're expected to be in the mid 20s, with Saskatchewan, Edmonton into those, 26, 27. It's going to stay fairly cool in the Atlantic Canada region, which is favorable for them because of their fire risk and the amount of fuel that they've got on the ground. And then even BC is not going to be quite as warm as the prairies going into today. But as we progress, let's take a look in 24 hours. You can see things are really going to escalate in terms of heat. So we're getting almost into that 30 degrees in the eastern part of Alberta, Saskatchewan, southern Manitoba, and Ontario. Plus, Atlantic Canada starts to experience a little bit warmer weather as we head into Tuesday. And then by Wednesday afternoon, parts of southern Saskatchewan hitting 30, continued warm weather. And if we forecast out to Saturday afternoon, you can see here, that's what we're looking like. That's what it's looking like for Saskatchewan and northern Manitoba. So 31 in Winnipeg, 30 in Thompson, 28 in Black Lake. It's going to get particularly warm. And what that means is we're going to see that fire risk increase across northern Saskatchewan, northern Manitoba for next weekend. So next weekend could be a fairly active startup. This is what we're looking at in terms of new startups. There's a decent sized one here. Looks like happened on May 21st, about 4 days ago. Already at 10,000 hectares. And then one here, full response. That's kind of, how close is that to Salt River? Fairly close. So probably we'll have to check and see what that response is looking like. As far as other new starts, nothing of significance going on. There are fires happening, but they all seem to be rather small or under control throughout BC, Alberta. So that's good news. And then some small clusters here in Atlantic Canada, New Brunswick. Something lit up yesterday evening. Even Newfoundland, what is that one showing from the 24th? So yeah, overall, again, we're kind of just edging into this wildfire season, but given the weather forecast, and this is just a forecast, by Saturday, maybe even into Sunday this coming weekend, we're going to want to watch Ontario, the west part of Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. Those are going to be, and even if in northern Alberta, southern Northwest Territories around Fort Smith, 25 degrees. It's going to stay warm and dry up there heading into the weekend. Yeah, even Thursday, Saskatoon is forecasted for 33 degrees. And then you're getting into those mid 20s. Even northern Alberta for a couple days, quite warm. So warming trends are going to happen in the west. The east seems to be holding off with a bit of cool weather. But you can see that warm, El Nino that's tracking is just bringing up that warm Pacific Ocean air up on the west. And then as we get this warm weather coming in from off the Atlantic, it's just kind of, you can see where the wind patterns are bringing those trends down through Quebec, and it's cycling up into Alberta, and it just warms up as it goes across the southern US into our neck of the woods. So quite a bit of weather activity. If we look at the wind warning for Newfoundland that they have going on today, let's look at, we'll go over to wind here. So you can see they're going to hit kind of that's by Tuesday overnight. Yeah, by tomorrow morning, you're going to see that part of Canada in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, there's going to be significant wind around Wreckhouse. So that's something to watch out for in Atlantic Canada, and that's what's going to drive those temperatures to keep a little bit cooler there, as that cool air comes off the Atlantic Ocean, which is then also slightly keeping some of that fire danger kind of in that moderate. But that wind is not going to help Newfoundland as things continue to dry out. So before I get into the training piece, I just want to recognize that we can't do this daily brief, and we can't do this without the sponsorship that we have. First Nations owned All About Abatement. They do on reserve and off reserve asbestos, lead, mold abatement for Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities. They sponsor our daily briefings, and they're sponsoring the development of the training program that we're putting together for Indigenous emergency management. So if you need a hazardous materials assessment, if you need abatement of any type of hazardous material within your community, Kyle and his team at All About Abatement do awesome work. And Kyle, being First Nations, understands the importance of mold abatement on reserve and making sure that if they abate anything such as asbestos, lead, mercury, whatever it is, that it doesn't spread throughout the home and cause further issues down the road. So their abatement services are top notch. They've been in my home and done abatement, and I wouldn't trust anybody else myself to do it. They're just really professional, really great to work with. And Kyle really cares about this industry, and they've put a lot of investment into their training, their certificates, and they will also talk to the communities they support about employment and making sure that if they do go into a community for a large job and there's opportunity, they can do some hiring within those areas. And then we've also have sponsorship through Premier Flood and Fire. Darcy and his team, again, they do a lot of work through treaty nations, but they do on reserve, off reserve, Indigenous, non-Indigenous. They specialize in water, fire damage, disaster restoration. They even do vandalism restoration. So graffiti removal, boarding up, things like that. So if you're looking for someone who has experience working with an Indigenous community, they have that experience, and they've been involved in some very significant wildfire losses where they had to restore multiple nation buildings and were involved in moving in a lot of equipment very quickly. Premier Fire and Flood also has like a 50-foot trailer that is available. So if your community or your nation requires to have restoration equipment like dehumidifiers, fans, things like that in your nation after an evacuation quickly, Darcy and his team have that trailer on standby as a disaster response trailer, and they're sponsoring us through their reconciliation strategy to help ensure that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities have the expertise in emergency management and restoration services that they need before an emergency and in the planning cycle. So thank you to Premier Flood and Fire for sponsoring us, and All About Abatement, just First Nations owned. We really appreciate their support in making sure that we can deliver these daily briefings and our training to communities across the country. So when we get into the fire risk and watching it over this week, I'm going to try and tie in some of the the data and weather updates that are coming in from, you know, this weather pattern that we're seeing in terms of temperature. I don't know if we've got any major storms. There's going to be a lot of there's a lot of lightning forecast. That's going to be interesting. In Alberta, Tuesday, we are going to get some rain across the province that is scheduled. So you can see how much lightning is forecasted with that. So that's going to mean for like southern Alberta, and getting into Saskatchewan, where it is quite extreme, those lightning strikes are likely are a risk for bringing up and causing fire starts. So as we get into the week here, especially on Saturday, there is a lot of rain forecasted for Alberta, 5 to 10 millimeters. If that holds true, you can see where there's that risk of lightning throughout Saskatchewan, Alberta. And if you take a look at it's right in those extreme areas. So that'll be probably the thing to watch out for and prepare for this week, just from a wildfire and weather hazard type of scenario. So again, if you're just tuning in, you can get these briefings on our app. There is no cost. app.hazardscape.com. We track as much news and wildfire data as we can for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities across Canada. On our briefing, you can download it as a Word document, and you can see all of our sources and information that we pull here. So there's not a lot of new activity in terms of First Nations news around emergency management. I mean, there's this big announcement here of $8.5 billion for Ontario First Nations to reclaim their child welfare systems. So that's, I mean, that overall is great news because it reduces that cultural risk of splitting up children and families from their culture. So we include some of those things in our reporting if we pick it up through news sources. So yeah, that's about it in terms of that. Our training, I'll just show you really quickly what we've got on. If you're looking for an emergency management certification or certificate, we've now staged our newest modules for our basic emergency management course for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. On the live app, you'll only see the emergency management coordinator role, but now we're going to have the past, present, future, and partners module, along with vulnerabilities and exposure, prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and funding your program. Those are all set to release in the coming week. So if you're Indigenous and you want your emergency management, basic emergency management certificate, you can get that on our app, and there's no cost for it. It is sponsored. So that is what All About Abatement, which is First Nations owned, and Premier Fire and Flood are helping us do. You can get that certificate right now at no cost. And with that, as you progress through your learning, you can earn learning credits to help your community pay for their emergency management support costs, which is kind of unique in Canada for Indigenous communities. And if you want the resource listing that we use to get all of our data for these briefings, they are right here. And up on our dashboard is the learning library where you can access those courses. So that's just a bit of an announcement. I'll be doing more walkthroughs of these courses as they roll out on our app, but stay tuned for that. But in terms of our briefing, this is where we're at. So I will leave it at that for today. If you have any comments or questions or feedback, please let us know either through app.hazardscape.com, or you can send us an email at support@hazardscape.com. We're always looking for feedback on how to improve these briefings, how to improve our training, and how to go forward in a good way to make sure that we are being responsible in the training and briefings that we provide. And I'll say before we depart, once again, visit All About Abatement's website and reach out to them if your community needs a hazardous materials assessment or abatement related to mold, asbestos, lead, toxic materials, any hazardous materials. Give Kyle and his team a call. Or if you also need fire and flood restoration services following an emergency or disaster, our sponsors at Premier, they're Canadian owned. You can give Darcy and his team a call at Premier, and they specialize in even having a process for leathers, pelts, bead work. If any of that is damaged from water or fire smoke, they've got a system for that. So thank you to our sponsors for their support. We will be back tomorrow morning with a new briefing on Canada's wildfire and hazard outlook for the week. As always, know your hazardscape and stay prepared. Take care.